Hello students, hope you are all doing well. Let us continue the poem The Rape of the Lock from where we have stopped. I think in the previous class we have finished till Canto 3. So let us start Canto 4. So what happened till Canto 3? Of course, you remember, I hope. But to recollect, we have seen in the Canto 1 how Belinda is introduced and how Pope introduces the supernatural machinery, that is Ariel, and the sylphs that are believed to be protecting women. So we have seen that, and how Belinda's dressing table and how she gets adored or decorated with the help of Betty. But it seems that sylphs, of course, take care of her appearance or decoration. And in the Canto 2, the scene changes from the dressing room of Belinda to the Thames, River Thames, on which these beautiful ladies and youngsters were just on sale and going to the court of Hampton to have the pleasures of royalty or royal pleasures they were going. And how Ariel invites all the sylphs and gives a big, a very lengthy speech about their duties, the duties of sylphs, and how they are ordained by the divine, the Almighty, the highest, to take care of all the celestial bodies, and also the humbler portion of their duties is to tend the fair, that is the fair ladies. That is why they are taking care of the fair virgins like Belinda. And then we have seen how Ariel assigns various duties to different sylphs, okay, named, Crispissa, okay, Melamont, Brilliante, etc. And all those were also threatened by Ariel that if, in the case of negligence, if they neglect their duties, Ariel threatens them with different kinds of punishments, okay, stringent punishments, which of course appear to us very funny, but that is a big punishment for the invisible creatures. The sylphs are invisible for our naked eye. So how, of course, they all take charge on the word of Ariel, their master. He's like master. So here I have also drawn your attention to notice the epic qualities of the Paradise Lost, and how a mockery is being made of the epic qualities. So it is for the universal themes that epics are usually written. But here, Pope is writing for a very silly issue, of course, that happened between two families, or especially between a lady and a gentleman, that is the cutting of the hair of this lady, that is Belinda, and how he is writing the incident, narrating the incident in a very epic manner, epic style, using similes and giving long speeches to the Ariel, as we have seen the long speeches of Saturn, okay, in the Paradise Lost, and similes, etc. So, in this way, in the three cantos, we have seen one, the Belinda's dressing room, the second is the voyage or the sail of these beautiful ladies and lords on the river Thames, and meanwhile, how the beauty of Belinda is described. And also we have seen how Ariel, of course, is assigning duties, etc. And in the Canto 3, we have seen how this Belinda is eager to play the game of Homer, and of course, she plunges on to play the game with two knights, okay, two knights, and then of course she was victorious. And there we have seen how Pope describes the momentary happiness of Belinda, especially this is these mortals, are very thoughtless. That's what Pope says. It's highly philosophical, and they, because Belinda takes much joy in her victory, which is not a very significant victory, yet she gives much importance to that victory. And she was very, it is like being on the cloud nine. That means she is very happy on her victory. No, not knowing or not realizing that her happiness is not going to be permanent. Her happiness is not going to be stay for a long time, because after a while, okay, after a while all these ladies and gentlemen were having a cup of coffee or tea, and while chit chatting, etc., how we have seen in the Canto 3 how Baron cuts the lock of hair of Belinda, which she of course uh, decorated with much interest, okay, and she loves that. Yet the Baron cut the hair, and then she gives a loud shriek. See, on the victory, of course, she gave a loud shriek, which echoed, okay, which gave an echo of her loud shriek with happiness. After a few, after some, and within no time, there is another shriek that is of course not of happiness but of sorrow, anger, or helplessness, etc. So now, while Belinda is wailing, it is Belinda, the unhappiness is her fate, and Baron is very happy. So I think we have stopped where Baron is celebrating his victory, and he says he also thinks that this price of the lock of hair is going to be with him forever. But we have seen how he prayed, and only half of his prayer was granted. So we have seen how he prayed the goddess of love, that is Venus, very well, and though gods have heard his prayer, half of the prayer is granted. That means he will cut the hair, whether he possesses it or not, it is a different matter. So now Baron is victorious, and he is celebrating the hour of victory, and he is thinking that his victory is going to be permanent. And he says, of course, he talks about the strongness, or everlasting nature of the steel, especially, okay, that is of course scissors, and he celebrates his victory. That is what we have seen in the 3 cantos. Now in the 4th canto, obviously, now it opens with the sorrow of Belinda. But anxious cares the pensive nymph oppressed, and secret passions labored in her breast. So now Belinda is very much oppressed, and she is, nurturing the grief in her heart. Secret passions labored in her breast. So she, of course, in her inner heart, is thinking of, many things. You can imagine what a girl like Belinda or a young lady like Belinda will think after the loss of the lock of hair. She might have, she might be thinking that I could not have decorated that much, or I could not have come to the Hampton Court. Okay, so such things. So, but things have happened, and now she is, what you say, full of grief. Not youthful kings in battle seized alive, not scornful virgins who their charms survive, not ardent lovers robbed of all their bliss, not ancient ladies when refused a kiss, not tyrants fierce that unrepenting die, not Cynthia when her mantua spinned Ori. Ever felt such rage, resentment, and despair as thou, sad virgin, for thy ravished hair? See, it's like a simile, epic simile here. The grief of Belinda is so great, so immense that to compare her grief, Pope, the speaker of the poem, has taken many comparisons. So now it is like a youthful king in battle seized alive. That means when a war is going on, of course, the war is between two kings or two kingdoms. If one of the kings gets caught by the other king alive, it is the most, what do you say, shameful thing for a king like figure. But here the speaker is saying that we can't think that even such kings nurtured such kind of rage or grief, okay, resentment and despair as Belinda is nurturing now, just for the loss of or cutting off the lock of hair. See, king means a great personality, and getting caught alive is the most shameful thing for a king. Okay, yet we may not find anyone in the history, the kings who have wailed like Belinda. So it's like exaggeration, yet it is only to bring to our notice how grief stricken Belinda is. So, what is the abomination that she received? What is a shameful thing, okay, that happened? And then another comparison is the scornful virgin who their charms survive. And another is lovers robbed of all their bliss. Even if lovers lost all their blessings, of course, blessings, they will not um, express this much of rage or grief. And ancient ladies when refused a kiss. Ancient ladies here means old ladies. Naturally, it's very ironical, it's satirical also to say that old ladies will not be kissed by the youngsters. If a lady is denied or refused to be kissed, even at that time, those ladies might not have felt this much grief or rage as Belinda is going through now. Nor the tyrant fears that unrepenting die. Even the tyrants, okay, despots, monarchs, of course, will not experience this kind of grief. And now it is the reference to Greek mythology. It is Cynthia is moon, okay, when her mantua spinned Ori. So her lightning is not, okay. There was a story of Cynthia, and so even the queen moon also, okay, might not have felt this much of grief. Ever felt such rage, resentment, and despair as thou, sad virgin? So now, happiest Belinda, for winning the game of Umber, have turned to be the saddest of virgins. For what? For the ravished hair. For that sad moment when the sylphs withdrew and Ariel weeping from Belinda flew. So the sad moment happened when the machinery failed. That means the supernatural machinery that failed actually. And of course, there we know that Belinda was nurturing a thought of love in her heart. That is why Ariel and his army has, flew away. Now, after that, Umbriel, a dusky, melancholy sprite, a melancholic sprite. So, Umbriel is also a spirit, is known for melancholy. As ever sullied the fair face of light, down to the central earth, his proper scene, repaired to search the gloomy cave of Spleen. So, Umbriel is actually like a metaphor for the bad moods or sad moods or sorrow moods of our mind. So, Umbriel is such a kind of melancholic spirit, sorrowful spirit. Always she has that shade of sorrow on her face, and then she always looks down to the earth, perhaps because feeling ashamed and also filled with sorrow. This Umbriel has seen Belinda's, of course, fate, and Umbriel wanted to increase the grief of Belinda because she takes pleasure in increasing the grief of those who are already in grief. That is the nature of Umbriel. And all these spirits have a goddess who is the goddess of spleen. Okay. So here it is a goddess for the grief. That is what here name we will know in the following lines. So Umbriel has gone to the cave of Spleen. Actually, spleen is one our body organ, okay? And it is believed that the juice, if the enzymes that are secreted from the spleen, if they are more, it's even in the medical sciences at that time of Pope, they believed that the secretion of the spleen, it is, I think, bile juice, whatever it is, it makes us gloomy. If the secretion of the juice from spleen is at the highest, we always remain gloomy for no reason, or we don't know why we are gloomy. So we can't be so happy. We'll be, this is like the nature, it depends upon the hormones also. So it here in those days of Pope, it is believed that our gloominess has some contact with the spleen. So that is why it is named as the cave of Spleen. Swift on his sooty pinions flits the gnome, and in a vapor reached the dismal dome. So very fast. Umbriel has gone to the cave of Spleen. It is a gnome, it is the earthly spirit. Okay. And in a vapor reached the dismal dome. So the cave of Spleen is always dismal. No cheerful breeze this sullen region knows. So when you entered into or near the cave of Spleen, you won't see any sight of happiness or cheer or activeness, etc. The dreaded east is all the wind that blows. See, always the east wind is not good, west wind is pleasant. So here, the dreaded east is yeah, on the at the cave of this plane. We notice only the east wind. That is, of course, not so cheerful, not so happy. Here in a grotto, sheltered close from air. So air and light, dark. Naturally, when you are grief stricken, you don't want to come on out into the sun and be cheerful, etc. You don't like light also. So like that, when this embryo has gone to such a place, that is the cave of spleen, where there is no light, okay, there is no cheerfulness, and only dreaded east wind keeps blowing, and it's always dark, okay, and screened in shades from day's detested glare. So the sunlight is obstructed because the grief-stricken souls, they don't like light. She sighs forever on her pensive bed. So the goddess Spleen is always lying on the bed and keeps sighing. Pain at her side and megrim at her head. So she is having two handmaids, goddess Spleen, that is the goddess of grief or gloom. Two handmaids are pain and megrim. Megrim is like the headache, like migraine headache, etc. Two handmaids wait at the throne. So that maids are there waiting at her throne, alike in place but differing far in figure and in face. Here stood ill nature like an ancient maid, her wrinkled form in black and white arrayed, with store of prayers for mornings, nights, and noons. Her hand is filled, her bosom with lampoons. So now, how is the goddess Spleen is there? So, is ill nature. Ill nature like an ancient maid means like a spinster, an aged woman who's not married, and she has wrinkles and black and white arrayed, with store of prayers for mornings, nights. She, of course, appears to be praying always, but her hand and her bosom is filled with lampoons. Lampoons are satirical statements, which hurt the other person. Their affection with a sickly mien. So always they try to humiliate the others, and also they try to pretend pretend as if they are not well, even though they are okay. With a sickly mien. So always they are sick. They feign sickness. They pretend to be sick. Shows in her cheek the roses of 18, practice to lisp. Of course, even though it is sick, of course, she has rosy cheeks and tries to lisp, saying something that is not audible to the others, the listeners, in a very clear manner, lisping, okay, like murmuring, lisping, etc. And hang the head aside, always hanging the head aside. It's an indication of not being interested in anything, of course, grief stricken, etc., faints into airs, okay, and languishes with pride. Of course, though she pretends sickness, she pretends pain, and she pretends affectations, etc., and keeps her head hanging to one side. She has pride also, too much of pride, to some extent. Having pride, having airs, of course, is a good quality, but if it crosses the limit, it becomes the negative quality. On the rich quilt sings with becoming oh. So always on the bed, always feigns the sorrow and just wraps herself in the gown and then on the bed gown, and for sickness and for show. The fair ones feel such melodies as these, with each new night dress gives a new disease. Actually, while describing the um, goddess Spleen and how she, of course, grants only the gloomy grief, etc. Here, the speaker says that there are some women who always feel like this, who always pretend like this, and of course, all they have many diseases to talk of. And he says each new night dress gives a new disease. Very ironical, of course. Pope is here because he thinks that, he's a misogynist. He's popular for being a misogynist. So he thinks that women, of course, um, project themselves as if they are sick and as if they are not enjoying anything, though they constant vapor over the place flies. So in the cave of Spleen, there is a vapor that is filled. Strange phantoms rising as the mists arise. Phantoms are the shapes in the mist, okay, the vapors. All dreadful forms arise. As hermits' dreams in haunted shades, as if they are like the dreams of hermit with the haunted shapes, frames, etc., are bright as visions of expiring maids, and they are like the vision of maid, an expiring maid. Now glaring fiends and snakes on rolling spires, pale spectres, gaping tombs, and purple fires. Now lakes of liquid gold, Elysian scenes, and crystal domes, and angels in machines. So these are the scenes that are visible near the cave of Spleen. So all dreadful, fearful, haunting figures like snakes, okay, and bridesmaids expiring, and then pale setters, tombs, okay, and fires, etc. Liquid gold, all these scenes. Unnumbered throngs on every side are seen. So near the cave, there are many who are thronging. It is only to say that most of the people are grief stricken. They are not happy. Of bodies changed to various forms by spleen. So there are many bodies which are changed into different shapes by goddess spleen. Here, living teapots stand. So the bodies are turned into, okay, like teapots. One arm held out, one bent, the handle this and that, the spout. A pipkin there, like Homer's tripod box. And the teapots, of course, as if they are lively things, they keep walking, raising hands, etc. And a pipkin is like, of course, like a teapot only with three legs, on which, it is actually put on the coals or fire, and um, it is used to heat or boil tea, etc. And then here's I see a jar. See how the goddess spleen has changed all the uh, grief-stricken ladies into different shapes like teapots, pipkins, jars, etc. Men prove with child as powerful fancy works, and maids turned bottles call aloud for corks. So men are turned into children, or maids become bottles, etc. So these are the very, of course, readily in a funny manner. Okay, of course, we will get the feeling of what do you say, haunted, or also a kind of funny, because if we see teapots speaking, or handling things moving, etc., and jars also, men behaving like child, and women turned into bottles, etc., these are funny yet dreadful things. And which is, this is to say that it is not a normal situation. And all those who are in grief, of course, behave in a very awkward and different manner. That's what perhaps the poet wanted to convey. So, feeling grief, feeling gloom, feeling sorrow. Of course, he thinks that women, of course, behave differently because of so many reasons, perhaps because of unfulfilled vanities, etc. And to such a place, umbriel, that is the gnome, the spirit, the earthly spirit, has arrived. Now, safe past the gnome through this fantastic band. So, fantasy, it's all imagination. You can very well understand that. So, fantasy, phantom, there used to be a cartoon, like a serial thing, phantom. You can, of course, it is all imagination, all figures and scenes, etc., at the cave of Spleen. So, carefully, Gnome has passed all these fantastic band. A branch of healing spleen wort in his hand, then thus addressed the power. So Umbriel is also male. Now he took a branch of healing spleen wort in his hand, and then went to the goddess of spleen, and he is speaking now the another speech, as if it is like the epic style. Hail, wayward queen. So how the goddess spleen is being addressed. Wayward queen. See, this is very paradoxical. Of course, queens should not be wayward, they should be stubborn. Okay. But here, spleen, the wayward queen, not being constant in their moods, thoughts, behaviors, etc. And Umbriel is addressing the goddess of spleen like this: who rules the sex to 50 from 15. It is ruling. The goddess spleen, of course, rules the minds, not ruling here physically, ruling the kingdom, etc., but it is ruling the hearts or minds of the fair sex, especially women, from 15 to 50. 50. So, no one is an exception for this, from the clutches of the goddess of spleen. Of course, we can, of course, never pass in life or never go through in life if we have this, without moods or fits of sadness, sorrow, uncheerfulness, etc. So, this is all due to spleen, and that is what believed. So, now the queen, the wayward queen, of course, holds the control of the fair sex from 50 to 15, and parent of vapors and of female wit, who give the hysteric or poetic fit. It's very satirical. Perhaps women might have started writing at that time, and even before that, they have been writing. Of course, their writing was never approved. And of course, here, Pope, he says this is granted by, it is, women writing or hysteric. You give, goddess spleen is being praised, that you are the one who control the moods of the female, say from 15 to 50, and you give them Okay, you are the parent of vapors and female wit. So vapor is means steam, of course, that can go into our body or anywhere. It means that goddess Spleen is the one who grants women the hysteria and wit and poetic fit. Now, women writing poetry is considered like a fit. Now, fits, this is a nervous disorder. Okay. So, very ironical here, Pope says that goddess Spleen is the one who gives the poetic fit for women or female wit also, and it is you who give the hysteria. It's nothing but madness. Hysteria is previously believed to be a female disease, basically a female disease. Men can't be hysteric, women are considered to be hysteric. Okay, whether it is true or not, that's a different fact. That it's there were attempts during 18th century and of course even 19th century to establish that these are all women diseases, hysteria, okay, etc. And here the speaker, of course, Pope, says, ridicules women. Even if they write in a fit of hysteria, and because of the vapors granted by spleen, on various tempers act by various ways. So it's, you will be wondering to know that Shakespeare, the greatest dramatist, of course, stated that frailty, thy name is women. That means they can't be static, they can't be stubborn. So, in the similar manner, he says that women, depending upon the vapors sent by goddess Spleen, they will act in various ways. Make some take physic, others scribbled place, who cause the proud their visits to delay, and send the godly in a pet to pray. A nymph there is that all thy power disdains. So he is praising the goddess Spleen, stating her as a wayward queen and how she keeps playing with the mind of the women. So because of your power only, the women could not be stubborn, be constant, and of course they have fits of hysteria, and they in the possessed by hysteria, they do different things and they act differently on different vapors. So some, of course, are good to look at, good physic, and some, of course, right, and some, of course, are very proud, and send the godly in a pet to pray. So these women have different natures only because of you. But there is one maid, there is one virgin who was never under your control. Till then, Belinda is considered to be the happiest soul. That is what we have seen in the Canto 2, the beginning of the Canto 2. The speaker describes that Belinda is very beautiful, happy. Her eyes are shining like the sun, even more shining than sun, and she laughs at everybody equally, etc. She enjoys life. That is what. She was not grief stricken. So that is what here Umbriel is stating. So there was a maid who, of course, disdains. And thousands more in equal mirth maintains. Mirth, happiness. She maintains herself in happiness. But oh, if ever thy nome could spoil a grace or raise a pimple on a beauteous face, like citron waters matron's cheeks inflame, or change complexions at a losing game, if ever with airy horns I planted heads, or rumple petticoats or trumble beds, or caused suspicion when no soul was rude, or discomposed the headdress of a brute, over to costive lapdog gave disease, which not the tears of brightest eyes could ease. Hear me and touch Belinda with chagrin. Chagrin is sorrow. That single act gives half the world the spleen. So here, of course, you are the one who keep on giving different kinds of things, so to make the happy hearts to undergo the gloom, to experience sorrow, or to be sorrowful, to be grief stricken, etc. in somber moods. So it is, simple things are enough to make women to change their moods, or to change from happiness to sorrow or sadness, grief, etc. So like all those simple things you have, like getting a pimple on face, okay, and if something falls on our cheeks, citron water, perhaps lemon water, etc. And if it falls on your face, of course it burns. And if you change your complexion, or losing a game, like Belinda is victorious, that is why she was very happy. But if at all she loses the game, we can imagine how grief stricken she could have been. Okay, and of course, with the airy horns, and if your petticoats are rumpled, or if your dumbled beds, and also lapdogs gets disease, okay, or if someone suspects us, or someone comments us, etc. These are all the, if you can read these lines, like say from 73 to like 80, etc., 81. So all silly simple things which are not a matter of worry, yet beautiful ladies like Belinda will get worried. Till now, Belinda was not at all like this. She was not worried. But now the time has come. So he says, touch Belinda with chagrin. Chagrin is sorrow. That single act gives half the world the spleen. See how he is describing, because Belinda is liked by everyone, and many will be after her, or many will be supporting her grief, and perhaps all her friends or supporters will experience the grief along with her. So that is why here Umbriel is telling to the goddess of spleen to touch Belinda with chagrin, so that half the world goes into the spleen, that is the grief stricken mood. The goddess with a discontented air seems to reject him, though she grants his prayer. No, this act, of course, you can visualize this. Just saying no, she grants. So just she gestures, her gestures, her facial feelings, and her movements of hands, etc., appear to be rejecting the prayer of Umbriel, but it grants. So this is the very nature of the goddess of spleen, and of course, this is the nature of women, according to Pope. A wondrous bag with both her hands she binds, like that where once Ulysses held the winds. A distant comparison is brought in. She actually had made a wonderful bag and tied it. It is like the bag of Ulysses, in which he actually tied the winds. There she collects the force of female lungs, sighs, sobs, passions, and the war of tongues. So these are all what she actually made a pack of: sobs, passion, war of tongues, blaming one another, sighs, etc. A while next she fills with fainting fears, soft sorrows, melting griefs, and flowing tears. Now, another bag, of course, is filled with fears, sorrows, griefs, flowing tears, etc. So, all these attached to the acts or moments of grief stricken women, especially. Not grief stricken people, but it is women. Naturally, we also know in the society men cry very rarely, and women, of course, are named after crying. So if you don't cry, you won't be a woman also. You won't be considered as a woman. It is a very unwomanly thing that if you don't cry also. So that is how a bag of sorrows, tears, sighs, okay, and blames, tongues, because mouth, we blame or we scold, etc. Two bags were given to Ambriel and gifts away, spreads his black wings and slowly mounts to day. Now, Ambriel, of course, spreading his black wings, of course, comes down. Okay, mounts to day because that is the dark cave of spleen. So, immediately when the bag is given or bags are given, full of sorrow, sighs, okay, all those things, grief, tears, etc. Umbriel came out of the cave of spleen, which is darkness, onto the day. Of course, black wings here. The spirit Umbriel is having black wings because they are earthly spirits, the indication of black earth, and then it is also sadness is always attached with black color, and all kinds of emotions, grief, and spleen is also dark in color. So that is how the goddess of the goddess spleen, and the description of the cave, and how she plays with the hearts of women and moods of women, and how women are made to be grief stricken only because of the charms of this goddess spleen. So this is women always keep complaining of illness. They feel madness, or they feel ill, or it is feeling or real. We don't know, but it is there. These things are always attached to women. Crying for some things, wailing for one or the other things, small things also. And the belief is such that in a given society, if you don't cry, you are not a woman. You won't be considered as a woman. So this is how the spirit Umbriel goes to the spleen, goddess spleen, and then brings a bag of sorrows, grief, tears, scoldings, etc. to the Belinda. Now, Umbriel wants to pour this bag, okay, on the head of Belinda so that her grief intensifies and there shall be a fight. There shall be, what you call a fight between the grief, intensified grief, of course, her grief shared by other women or others who are her supporters, and there should be two groups, and there should be a fight. So bringing a fight is like the epic quality. So the mock, as he is mocking, the epic, of course, the how the fight goes on. We don't find in this fight the thunders, etc., but small things only. This we will continue in the next class. So this is the 95 lines that we have seen. That is the description of the goddess cave of goddess Spleen, and also how she grants the griefs for women especially. Okay, I hope you will go through this. Have a nice time.